What's up, guys? We just played another Road to 2100 rapid game because the Elite Chess servers are down, so I can't do the speed run. Hopefully, they'll be back up tomorrow. So, for the time being, I went on chess.com, played a game against Paws Forever. I kicked him out of the 2000 club. I don't feel bad about it. It's not easy to stay up here. He's going to have to grind, win another game to get back in. Let's go through it. I open up with e4, pawn in the center, looking to go for, my bishop's opening, something like that. But he plays the Sicilian. What can you do? I go knight c3. I develop a minor piece towards the center. All is well. Out of all the Sicilians, Black decides to play the hyper-accelerated dragon by playing g6 on move 2. This tries to fianchetto the bishop super early and take control of the dark squares immediately without putting a knight here to be kicked. So it's just a different variation of the Sicilian. Fine. But you'll notice that in another Sicilian, in my other video, I push d4, and when he takes back with the pawn, I recapture with the queen. And in that video, Black's pawn was on c6, so he couldn't hit the queen with the knight. Now in this video, it's a little different, but similar. So let me show you. I played d4. What does this threaten? His pawn, right? His pawn's hanging. So he has to do something about it. It also opens up my bishop. Very nice move, grabbing the center. Of course, Black takes. And what does it threaten? The knight. I have to recapture. Now, I don't have a knight here to recapture with. I recapture with the queen. And the thing is, he cannot play knight c6 hitting my queen because his rook is currently hanging. So that's why it's safe and okay to take with your queen in this line, because he still can't hit you with tempo. He has to address the issue. So he develops his knight and blocks the diagonal, so it makes sense. Now it's back to us, and we can simply continue with our development. So I just develop knight f3, very simple move, attacking the center. And now I have two pieces out. My bishops have both their diagonals open, a pawn in the center, a queen. And what does he have? Just a knight? I mean, technically the position's even, right? But that's only if you play perfectly. And it just looks way easier to play from white in a position like this. I would always choose white here. Anyway, Black now develops the knight with the tempo. Of course, we can't hang the queen. We have to move it. But I don't want to just go back home. If I could pick a more active square, I would like to do that. So I go queen a4, similar to what Black does in the Scandinavian when they go queen a5. It's a very active move that kind of pins the knight should they move the d-pawn, which they want to do at some point. It just applies a little bit of pressure. So that's what I do. And Black goes d6. So now the knight's pinned, right, because of the queen. And so basically, when I go queen a4, what is white's plan or threat here? And so my idea is, if it was my turn right now, I would play e5. He can't take the pawn because it's defended. And his knight can't jump in the center. So it would have to go to a super awkward square, right? And so that would be great for me. So he's trying to figure out how to stop that pawn thrust. So he goes d6. Fine, he stopped it. Good move. But as white, I mean, you could just continue with developing, right? That's just normal stuff. Bishop out, bishop out. Whatever, just developing moves are normal. But in this position, whenever you have the pawns in the center and you can push them, I mean, it's not always good. It might be a blunder, but you should consider it. So in this case, I considered e5 because he can't take with the knight because it's pinned. right? If he takes with this pawn, I can recapture with my knight in the center with the threat on this knight, double hitting it. So I played d5. It's one of the possible moves you can do. Now black, he can't move his knight to a terrible square because that's terrible. So he has to take. He took our pawn, so we're forced to take back. And this comes with a threat on his knight. We're threatening to win material immediately, so he has to defend the knight another time. He chooses the most logical move by developing the bishop and defending the knight. This comes with the threat of knight takes knight. Because he broke the pin, so now my knight's hanging and his knight's free to go. So currently my knight on e5 is hanging. Okay. I mean, you could move it back, but I don't want to do that, obviously. You don't really want to defend it because your queen's in the line of fire after he takes the knight. So, and also this is a bishop on an open board because we traded lots of central pawns. So I'll gladly take the bishops. So I take his bishop, and yes, I did move my knight 3 times, but I got a bishop out of it and a more active position out of it. So I was expecting him to take with the queen, but he took with the knight, which surprised me a little. And so I said, okay, so now center's pretty open. I have the bishop pair. I mean, things are fairly equal, but I'd still rather be white. I mean, my bishops, without even moving, are slicing the board, right? These knights are equivalent, but these bishops aren't because his is closed in. But it's my turn. So I just develop. I just say, okay, I want to, if he gives me the chance, like let's say he fianchettos or something, maybe you could long castle, although that might be asking for trouble because your king's there. In any case, my whole idea is to put a rook on d1. If he doesn't fianchetto, like let's say he does, I don't know, any other like normal moves or whatever, then maybe a long castle. But okay, so anyway, I just developed my bishop. I put it on a super active square, and I prepare rook d1 to line up with his queen. But he moves his knight to b6. This comes with a threat on my queen. I don't have any good counter threats that make any sense, so I basically just have to move my queen. I was trying to figure out what the most active square is. You could move it to b3, but I don't like kind of boxing it in with these pieces here. Like it doesn't have mobility on the third. So I kind of don't like its only mobility being this way. So I decided I wanted to go to one of these 4 squares, and I figured that e4 was the most active, so that's where I went. Now it's black's turn. He finally fianchettos the bishop. Makes perfect sense. Now, a lot of you, especially if you're lower rated, would look at this and say, oh my god, he's gonna take my knight with check and ruin my pawn structure. I'm gonna have doubled isolated pawns and isolated a pawn, and that's terrible. And that is a terrible pawn structure, but that doesn't mean it's a terrible position. It's a good position because you may have a bad pawn structure, but he's gonna have a bad position because he gave you his dark square bishop, which is by far gonna be his best piece, and he has created dark square weaknesses around his king. And we're gonna have a dark square bishop ready to hop in once his disappears. So I have no intention of defending this. I simply go rook d1 and I counter the queen. Now he could still take this knight because it comes with check, right? It's not like I stopped it. I just don't care about it. I would love to take his bishop. And also this pawn, if it went here, would stop this knight and support the dark squares. So he has to move his queen. He goes to c7 because, I mean, there's not that many squares to go to. And he wants to cover this knight in case I apply more pressure. So he just figures that the c7 square is good, However, this allows some improving moves for free. Now, normally you would want to, let's say, develop the bishop and castle, right? Um, but in this case, I decided that I can improve my knight for free by going knight b5. It puts it on this square, which is a nice square, because not only does it hit the queen, which doesn't have many squares to go to, but if he ever kicks it, or, then he might be hanging this knight, right? So maybe my knight is unkickable in a sense. And so I figured I'd get this free improving move. It also removes this doubling of my pawns. Yes, the B pawn is hanging, but um, one, it's his queen's hanging, so that's more important. So he moves his queen because he doesn't know where to put it, right? And I'm also possibly threatening this fork if he does something dumb. So he throws it in the middle. And this threatens my queen as well as this hanging pawn. I tried to figure out ways to make it work without trading the queens, but it just doesn't. The best move is by a lot to trade the queens because you can't just leave his queen in the center and you have to move to a bad spot. Like he shoulders you from a good spot to a bad spot. Like, you can't let him do that. You have to take his queen. Now, of course, he has to take with the bishop because this fork would win the game. So the bishop covers that square. He takes with the bishop, which threatens this pawn, but if he takes the pawn, he's going to get forked, so not really a threat. And here, I thought for a while, I wanted to play f4 with the idea that this bishop has to look at this square. So if I go f4, if he goes back here, he just hangs a pawn. So he's basically forced to go back to b8. So I was thinking f4, bishop b8. I mean, yeah, it's bad his bishop has to go there. And yeah, his rook may never get out because he can't really push the pawn. But I wasn't sure what to do. Like, I guess you just continue with a normal game after that. But um, I decided to play a different move. I decided that because I mean, this is good because of, he has to go bishop b8, right? So that's obviously a good thing. But I figured it's good, but not special. So I decided on c3. Computer says f4 is best, c3 is second best. I like c3 more just because A, it stops his pieces from using these squares, and B, uh, it gives me another support launch square. So like I can hop this knight here if I want now. You know, if he takes, you know, and it's good position for me. So it's another square. It also shuts his bishop down from ever putting pressure on this diagonal. So it's a super good multi-purpose move. f4 is the other option, but I still like c3. Good move. And now he knows that if he pushes this, he's hanging his knight. He knows that, but he also knows he's going to take my knight response. I get excited here because I calculated in my head, okay, so he pushes, I take, he's going to take. I'm going to take his pawn. If he takes my pawn, I actually have checkmate on the spot. Right? My bishop supports this. His knight can't take because it's pinned. And even if, you know, it could, I could just snap the knight off the board and then checkmate. So I got excited when he played this, and I took his knight. He, of course, took my knight, and I pre-moved the recapture, hoping that he would just, you know, very quickly take this pawn, you know, because I took a pawn. But he stopped himself. I mean, I'm completely winning here. These bishops are just phenomenal. Of course, I also have a 3-on-1, so if all the pieces come off the board, it's just an easy win, right? So now I take his pawn. He can't take mine back because of checkmate, and that's really bad for him because if he could at least somehow get this pawn, it would be a 2-on-1. It'd be a lot more feasible for him to try to draw if I make a mistake. But he doesn't want to get mated, so he castles. Now he is threatening to take this pawn, but it's too little too late. A4, you can go A3 as well if you want to do like a even safer, slower, you know, because it's protected by a pawn, so you never have to worry about it. I go A4 just because I want to get this rolling fast as possible. But whatever, it's a little riskier, but it's faster. He puts his rook over. I had no idea why he did this move because I'm definitely not taking his knight with my bishop. And like he can't do anything here, so I'm not sure what his rook is doing there. I took this opportunity to castle, of course. It's funny, they want king d2 and king c1. Oh, castle. Castling is the best. Then he moves his bishop back to trade. Now you could definitely trade and you're still winning. But then his rook comes here. I don't get to infiltrate. It's not a big deal, but I didn't want to do it. So I just moved my bishop back and said, these pieces are awkward. And now I can infiltrate if I want. Again, I'm up a pawn with a 3-on-1, so trading is fine. And now he blocks the file with bishop d6. Good move. I can't access it anymore. My rooks are kind of like, you know, how are they getting in the game, right? You'd have to do something weird like this, but even if these are the best moves, which it is the best move, it's always so precarious, and you never really know what it's doing there. If it's ever going to get hit with weird pawns, I don't know. I don't like stuff like that unless you have a concrete move or follow up. And so I decide to play f4. And what this does is takes control over the central square with the only other pawn I have. And it removes the possibility of the bishop going back to this diagonal or the knight jumping into that square. So now I have the option of taking over this diagonal by putting my bishop here. His bishop can never go here anymore because of my f4 pawn. Also f4, you know, maybe at some, not right now because the bishop hangs, but if you ever wanted to go e5, f4 is a nice, you know, counter to that. Also f4, there might be a possible f5 in the future. So it's just a multi-purpose improving move that I liked. What are other possibilities here? I guess you could move your rook over even though it's not doing anything specific just yet. We could put our bishop back here. I really do like it on this diagonal. And then I guess if he goes back, you can just trade the second time around. You can make a luft. That's an improving move. h3 or g3 even to blunt the bishop. Those are the moves. I play a 4. And then he jumps his knight into the side. This kind of blockades the pawns, but I'm not going to really be moving them when he has all these pieces. I need to trade stuff first. And like, this doesn't threaten anything, even though it may look cool. And this, again, it looks cool, but it does come with a threat. But even then, bishop c1 and like that's the end. So it may look like he's doing stuff, but he's really not doing anything. It's not clear exactly what to do or how to improve, so you have some options. So when you're not sure what to do, you just do like the obvious stuff. Like let's say, okay, I have 2 rooks, I can double them, right? So even if you're not sure where they're going to be doubled, you can lift one. So like rook d2 or rook f2, with, you know, with the idea of one going behind the other. Um, or you could just do what I did, which was bishop d4. And the point of this is it's an improving move. It allows us to go here next if we want, because we do want to trade pieces. We just want to do it on our terms. Like if we took the bishop here earlier, it puts his rook here, it stops infiltration. That's like his terms, right? But if I put the bishop here, you know, he can't hang the pawn. So let's say he takes and I take, open the F file, it's our terms. Also, it's nice here. It's on a defended square. It also defends the pawn. So he does jump his knight in here. One of the 2 possible cool looking moves that don't do anything. So this does hit the pawn. Not a big deal. You can go b4 probably. You can go b3. You can defend it with rook f2. I was going to go b3, but then I'm like, I don't know. Let's say he does something like, what was I calculating? I don't know. Knight to the side, hitting my bishop. And then if I move my bishop somewhere, maybe he comes in here, hits this bishop. I mean, his knight's trapped probably, and it's not even a thing. But then I said, you know what? Let me do the most forcing moves first. Checks, captures, threats. I'm like, let me look at the capture, because at first I dismissed it. But then I'm like, let me actually calculate it instead of just dismiss it. So I'm like, okay, bishop takes knight, rook takes bishop, and then b3. I have this boat, the bathtub pawn structure, only with a bishop, and it's actually impenetrable. So I'm definitely want to do this because the knight's the only thing that can cause problems. Take the knight, he takes the bishop, boom, b3, and now the only, like, he would want to attack the b pawn, but his own pawn's in the way, and everything's defended. So he has to go back, and now the game is easy because he has absolutely no counterplay without the knight, and this is a self-sufficient structure. So you could just take your time to improve these three pieces and trade everything off. I decide that this construction is no longer necessary and that these are self-sufficient. Um, oh no, not yet. Next move I did. Okay, so this turn I was gonna go c4, which says you're never gonna touch the structure again because it's all on light squares, and the only weak one is the b3 pawn, which you can't access. So it's impenetrable. But excuse me. First, I threw an f5. Computer's not a big fan of this, but I'm not entirely sure why. I looked at the line they gave and it was really weird. Like it wasn't human-like. It still looks good to me even after going over their line. I guess I would need some GM to explain it to me. Although they might actually like it because, like I said, if he takes, that's bad for him. Um, if he doesn't take, maybe you can push. That looks like an idea. And even if worst case scenario, you just trade a pawn and like for his H pawn, your rook is a little more open. So like, I don't see how it can be a bad move. I can see how it might not be the best move, but I don't see how it would hurt your position. I think it can only improve your position. Anyway, he obviously doesn't go down some ridiculous imaginary computer line. He plays normal moves. Although he played e5, and this I really didn't like. I thought he would just, I don't know, develop his piece or something. But you can't push past this, obviously, because of en passant. So he pushes past and hits the bishop, but I just take en passant. And now he has an isolated pawn, and my rook is open, so that makes no sense. Like, that's just a really bad move. And now it's our turn, and now I'm like, okay, I want to come in here and attack stuff. But if I do, he's going to kick my bishop. If my bishop moves, this pawn's hanging. I already have a winning position. Let me just snuff out any weakness. And I go c4. Now this bishop is free to go. It doesn't matter if he kicks it because it's not needed for defense. And he does kick it. Now I was considering which diagonal. You could go on this diagonal, but I don't really see the point. It stares at the king, but you don't have queens. I would rather stay on my king's diagonal and blockade this passed pawn, which is his only asset in the entire position. So it makes sense. Now he has nothing to do, so he moves the rook over, and here I calculate. Again, I get a little excited. I calculated a tactic, but it's a little bit of hope chess because it's not forced. Rook takes rook, very natural. King takes rook. I was hoping and thought he would do that. And then I would have taken his bishop with my rook. His rook would take my rook. I would go bishop c5, pinning the rook to the king. He would go king e7. I would take the rook. He would take my bishop. I would go king f2. He would go king c5. I would go king e3. He would go king b4. And we could play that position with me winning. So, but that didn't happen. I took, and then he stopped, and then he took with the bishop. But then I said this can't be good either because I can just go and pin the bishop, and when I pin the bishop, next move, if it was my turn again, I'm going to go bishop h6, hitting it a second time, forcing rook f6 and mass trades, and again run my king up, run these two pawns up, win the game. So I knew this was bad. I know once I went to the back rank, he would be forced to go king f7 to get out of the pen, and that would allow me to do the check and hit, you know, both of these pawns. Now, when you're looking at this and you're deciding which pawn do I take, it's a very important decision. Your win condition is these three pawns. Now, they're already 3v1 is already a win. You don't like it's whatever, but 3 versus 0, even way, way, way better. Whereas on this side, if you turn this into a 2v1, or whether it's a 2v2, it does not matter at all. So focus on the right stuff. Take the right pawn. And now he moves that pawn. I wasn't going to take it anyway because it has no relevance on this game. So I decide I'm up. I have the winning pawn construction. This supports this. Let me trade pieces. He missed it. He moves his king closer. Now his rook can move. No longer pinned. I have to snap it now. He takes with the king. And I run my king in. All I have to do is trade these two bishops. And that's GG. He blockades 3 pawns with 1 bishop. And that's why you have to be very careful in bishop endgames. Especially opposite color bishop. Because 1 piece can blockade a ton of pawns. But this isn't opposite. This is the same. That means I can kick out his bishop. So now this pawn's hanging. And a lot of you might take it. But you don't need to take it. You need to just kick out this bishop. And he'll resign. So I go king e2. Simply to support bishop d2. And this is endgame. He pushes this, totally irrelevant, right? And there are a million ways to win this, but this is the most logical to me. I go here and just get him out of this square, so I can push my pawns. And if he trades, it's obviously losing. So he goes here, but now I can push. He goes here hitting my pawn. I put it on a light square. There's nothing to do about this. And he resigns. Great game in the hyper accelerated dragon. Something's in my throat. Not over 90% accuracy again. Pretty good game. I'm happy with this. Another Sicilian. I'm getting more practice. A little more straightforward. I definitely preferred from the white side. That's for sure. Alright guys. Hopefully you learned something. If not, hopefully you enjoyed the music. Submit your rapid games in my Discord while I go clear my throat. Goodbye.